Hi cuties! So today I'm going to show you how to make a Chao head charm. This is a Chao head that references mainly the Chao from Sonic Adventure 2. So the main material that I use to make my Chaos is polymer clay. For this particular head Chao charm, for the neutral Chao, I use Sculpey 3 polymer clay as opposed to Primo or their other variations. I feel like Sculpey 3 is very easy to mold. It's very, especially if you have arthritic pain, Sculpey 3 is very soft and you don't have to, what do you call it, like prime or your clay so that it's warm enough to shape. But with the Sculpey 3 clay, you could just sculpt it right away, right out of the packaging. It's also very easy to make round objects as opposed to Primo. I feel like if you're rolling things into a ball, they turn out more choppy. But with Sculpey 3, you can get a perfectly smooth ball. Of course, if you don't have any of these products, you can still make this Chao head charm. I'm just saying that the Sculpey 3 is what I've had the best experience with in making something that looks semi-professional of a Chao head charm. So the colors that I use is this blue color. I'm not sure what specific color it is, but it has this like glittery tint to it. And it may not be super accurate to the actual Chao color. I just got it at a art recycle store and they happen to have Sculpey 3s, which was an amazing at a cheap price too. When I first made my Chao head charm, I just decided to experiment with that color and I think they work great. So the other color that I use for my Chao head charm is yellow. For this instance, I recommend using a Primo actually to make the Chao ball, just because they are more firm and that you'll be putting a bead landing through the ball so that it helps keep the round shape that you're molding it into. And since it's small, you don't have to worry about the ball not looking as perfectly spherical. And again, I don't really know which specific color name this is, but hopefully the video provides enough as a color reference. And the third color we'll be using is Sculpey White, Sculpey 3 White, and we'll be using this for the eyeballs of the Chao. And yeah, that's pretty much all of the polymer clay colors you need. You can also opt for just using any color and then painting it eventually, but I won't show you how to do that in this video, but it is an option. So right now I'm shaping the Chao head with a blue polymer clay, and I'm referencing the specific 3D model of the Chao from Sonic Adventure 2. So the Chao's head is basically round, so you want to roll it into a ball between your hands. Make sure that you want it to your desired size. I usually make these Chao head charms half an inch tall, and basically for the shape of the Chao head, it would assume that that little point at the top of their head would be right at the middle, but actually when looking closer at the Sonic Adventure model, they're actually a bit more towards the back and slopes down to the face. So we're gonna do that, but I've also made Chao head charms where I've just made it from the center, and those look okay too and still turn out cute. So you want to be careful with your fingers and making sure that you're not applying too much pressure. Try to really touch this clay lightly as you're trying to mold it. I also like to tap the side where the eyes are going to be kind of flat-ish, because that's where you're going to paint the eyes and where the face is going to stand out. Give it a semi like two-dimensional look. I also like to flatten the bottom a bit so that when you place the Chao head charm down, it can just stand on its own instead of rolling around. And you can do all this while still maintaining the round shape. I also like Sculpey 3 because the thumbprints don't show up as much. So when I'm sculpting this, I'm not using any other tools or as less as possible. I'm just using my hands. And once you're done molding the Chao head, the base of it at least, you can now bake it. If you find any dirt speckles on your Chao head so far, you can take a really thin object or needle or toothpick and just kind of scrape it out as carefully as you can. And with the holes, you can just smooth the clay back over if you don't want to roll up the Chao head and form it again. And then once you're very satisfied with the shape of your Chao head, you can put a bead landing. I like to put my bead landing at the back of the tip of the head. Very carefully center it too, because you don't want to smooth over the hole again. Because the more that you're trying to make up for your fixes, the more the shape of your Chao head at risk. So very carefully put a bead landing right through the desired place, and don't push it all the way so that it pierces through the ends, the bottom of the Chao, because if you do, you're going to have to smooth over the clay over that hole. And now your Chao head is ready to bake. So now we're going to sculpt the Chao ball. This should be pretty easy and straightforward. Take the amount that is proportional to your Chao head. You might be using less clay than you think you're going to use. But yeah, just hold it over your Chao head as a reference if you're unsure, and keep adding or removing clay as needed. Rub it against your hand so you can roll it into a ball. Since it's so small, you can just open your palm and use your fingertip and rub over your palm so you can get the desired ball shape. Then put a bead landing through the ball right through the middle, and be careful, of course, about your positioning. And ideally, I think for me, it's better if you pierce the bead landing through the clay as fast as possible so that you're not risking any more of the shape being molded by the pressure of the bead landing pressing through, because as you can see, as you pierce it through the bead landing, the shape becomes more oval-like. But once you pierce it through, you can try your best to reshape the clay on the bead landing so that it looks more like a ball. Now we're ready to preheat the oven. Read the instructions on your Polymer Clay brand's packaging and see what is the ideal temperature to cook it at. So me using Sculpey 3 and Sculpey Primo, I'm going to set my oven at 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the preheating is over, I will set my timer to 15 minutes. I'm going to use the minimum amount of time for the clay to harden because I'm going to be putting these clay pieces back into the oven again once we apply the eyes. And if you leave your clay creation in the oven for too long, you will see that your clay has brown coloration on it. That's because you burnt it. Wait for the Chao head charm to bake in the oven for like 15 minutes. And then once it's done, let it out and let it cool for a bit. Once you let your creation out, it can also be a bit more malleable. So if you forget to put the bead landing into your Chao before cooking, you can also take this chance to put the bead landing into the Chao head now, and also the ball. But I would not recommend this because sometimes I've done this in the past and the Chao ball pretty much cracks. Be sure to put your bead landing in right before you bake. So now that your Chao head and Chao ball are all cooled off, we're going to place the eyes onto the Chao head. I used to paint the eyes white and the eyes black directly onto the Chao, but I find that when I was painting, it was very hard to get the perfect shape, and it's easy to erase when you're initially painting onto your polymer clay creations if you have an alcoholic white. But then when you mess up the black layer of the eyes and you're using an alcoholic wipe to fix your mistakes, then also the white comes off and then you have to do it all over again. So I find it best to sculpt the eyes. It's going to be on your Chao for a very thin layer. This part may be hard depending, but some tricks that I've done to make the process easier for me is I get 2 equally sized small white pieces, I roll them into a ball, and then I stick them into the middle of where I want to place it on the Chao's head. The eyes can get a little particular because you have to consider the spacing of the Chao head for optimal cuteness. If it's too far or if it's too close together, it may not just look right. But I find it best to put it in the lower area of the front of the Chao's head, and also following an artist's trick of the eye rule, where the space between the eyes is equal to the width of the eye itself. Yeah, so when I put the ball onto the Chao's head, I then flatten it with my finger and then try to round it as perfectly shaped as possible. You don't want the Chao's eye to look like just some blob. You really want to make it perfect. Especially for me, I want to make this look like it was professionally printed or stenciled. You may even want to, if you know how to use it, use your own stencil. I've been thinking maybe I can use a vinyl stencil that I can print with my Cricut so I can make these perfect eye shapes. But for now, we're just sculpting and freehanding this. Sculpting these eyes takes a lot of patience. But if you just work at it enough, you will eventually get your desired eye shape, and it will really pay off. So as I'm applying these eyes, I actually don't have two equally sized white balls, as like the first one I realized I had too much and then I removed some, and then I had to create another piece of white Chao eyes. It's pretty much okay to add and remove clay for the Chao's eyes as you're applying it onto the Chao head. Another tool that you can use to help you round the Chao's eyes a bit more, for what I'm using, is the thinnest ball option of these polymer clay tools, and I just kind of edge it around in making a perfect eye shape. You can also use your nails or possibly even a toothpick as well. So when I'm using this polymer clay tool, it's almost needle-like, so it's kind of ideal for removing excess clay around the edges. But like I said, have lots of patience and you will eventually get the perfect eye shape. Make sure that both of the eyes are equally sized, that the spacing is correct for optimal cuteness, and also just use references. It will help out a lot. For me, I opened up my copy of Sonic Adventure 2 and just went in the Chao garden and rotated the camera around so I can really see and study the shape of the Chao's head and its features. I also poked my bead landing through my Chao's head a bit too far and it made a hole at the bottom. Once you've baked your Chao head, that's perfectly okay, because before we're going to bake it again for the eyes to harden, we're going to just apply some clay at the bottom and smooth it over the hole so that it's seamless, and we're just going to bake it again and it will be like the hole is never there. So again, preheat your oven to 270 degrees or to whatever your polymer clay's instructions are, and I placed my Chao head in there with the eyes for an additional 15 minutes, and now it's completely hardened over onto the Chao's head shaped. Now the Chao head is ready to be painted on. So the colors I'm going to be using is lemon yellow and black. Yellow for the top of the Chao's head, because as you can see on the design, there's a yellow gradient on the tip of the Chao, and black for the eyeballs. And the paint brushes that I'm using is one micro brush. Its size is 20/0, and just grab the smallest brushes that you have. I've also heard that for micro detailing, a toothpick can work, but personally for me, I've never had a good experience with that. So go to a local Michael's and grab a micro brush from the brush section, or whatever art store that you go to, because I like to shop locally instead of shipping my items from Amazon, even though there's like such a large array of supplies on Amazon that you cannot get in store. But I would use Amazon as a last resort. So for applying the Chao's eyeball, I'm using my smallest brush, and I'm starting from the center and carefully applying as close to the outer edges that I can. And this is based on the reference of the Chao, where I can see that the Chao's pupil should be just an inner shape of the whites of the Chao's eyes. so it should really hug the edges as close as they can. Another tip to making really great Chao eyes is covering the black of the inners of the Chao's eye and covering less black on the outers, so that it kind of looks like your Chao is very looking forward instead of, and I'll provide some images on the video just to explain this concept better. So as you're painting, it's okay to mess up the Chao's eye shape. For me, the black paint is bleeding over the whites more than I've intended to, and I'll show you some methods of how to remove this paint. So once you've covered as much black as possible and you want to remove the excess paint, there are two methods that you can use. You can grab some rubbing alcohol. I'm using isopropyl 70% alcohol. Pour it into a container. Just pour a really small amount and get a couple of toothpicks. Dip your toothpick into the alcohol and then apply it to whatever black paint that you want to erase. So this method isn't as ideal for me because it doesn't completely wash out the blackness on the eye. It kind of just dilutes it and may dry as gray onto the whites of the Chao's eyes. So another method that you can do is use white paint and then just paint over the black that bleeds over onto the whites of the Chao's eyes. So this is ideal for shaping your Chao's eyes. You may have to go through multiple goes of like applying black paints and then applying white paints for the mistake. But then you might overpaint the whiteness into the black and then you have to apply more black paints, and then just repeat until your eyes of the Chao pupil is at its most perfect shape that you have. So this is just like molding the whites of the Chao's eyes. Just be patient with it and you'll eventually get your desired Chao's eye. So for this instance of the recording, I was very satisfied that my Chao's eye came out like just almost perfect without having to apply different layers of paint. I just had to apply this white paint and it was just almost ready to go. So that shows that my practice has been paying off. So now we're going to paint the tip of the Chao's head, and we're going to do it in a way that it's a gradient effect. So this will involve painting many layers. I would say 4 layers I think I did for this video onto the Chao's head. So since this Chao charm is very small, we're not gonna squeeze out the paint onto any surface. We're just gonna dip the paintbrush directly right into the tube. When I'm painting on the tip of the Chao's head, I apply the bead landings so that the paint does not dry over the hole. That could be a problem. So putting a bead landing will prevent blockage of the Chao's hole. So for this first layer, it's going to be the biggest layer around the Chao's head. The shape of it would be larger than the actual coloration of the yellow on the Chao's tip. This is how we're going to get that gradient effect. Make sure that when you're dipping the paint brush into the paint that you're not grabbing too much paint, because there's too much paint, it will kind of like clump over the Chao's head and you might have to use an alcoholic wipe to do over the whole tip again. So for every layer of painting the Chao's tip, I'm going to wait for it to dry a bit. Since it's such a thin layer, it's going to dry very fast, and you can test the dryness by placing your fingertip over the paint and seeing if any of the paint sticks to your finger. And if it doesn't, it's pretty much dry and you can paint another layer. So while I'm waiting for the paint to dry on the Chao's tip, I'm going to adjust my bead landing of the Chao's ball. So I'm using a pair of pliers for the other ends so I can make another eye pin hole. I don't have much experience doing this, but I'm glad that this attempt was successful. So this is going to make your Chao's ball very flexible on your charm. But yeah, I'm basically just using my pliers and trying my best to make another eye pin on the other ends of the Chao's ball. So now that the first layer is dry, you want to apply another layer onto the chow's tip. And this layer will be smaller than the first layer. And then your next layer is going to be smaller than the last layer. And the last layer will just be the very tip of painting the chow's tip. So now the painting stage of the chow's head charm is finally complete. Now we're going to finally apply the bead landing onto the chow's head. So for my previous chow charms, I've applied the chow ball directly into the bead landing that will attach to the chow's head. While this method works in terms of appearance wise of how the chow's head actually is, I really want to have the effect of the chow ball floating over the chow's head. So I find maybe this method could be too malleable, as you know, you could accidentally sit on this chow charm and the bead landing could bend over and it could be hard to bend back, or the eye pin can just come out so easily since it's not completely touching the chow's head itself. So for when you want to apply the bead landing onto the chow's head and really secure it, for me, I'm using this jewelry and metal glue. It's basically like a super glue, specifically for jewelry, and I'm going to attach it to the tip of my bead landing. But first, I have to cut my bead landing into its desired shape, and you want to use as much of the bead landing as you can without piercing through the chow's head. So to shorten the bead landing, it's ideal to use a pair of pliers that can cut through metal. And then once you have your desired bead landing shape, so that it's completely inside the chow with the pins poking out, then you're going to apply the tip of the bead landing into the glue, just the very tip. Be careful to not get the glue on your fingers. And then apply the bead landing into the hole and press down and wait for it to bond completely onto the clay. So personally for me, I like to orient the eye pin kind of so that it's more open to the profile view of the chow head, so that when you're applying your charm to an earring or a strap, the head is looking head on. It's easier to rotate it so that it's looking head on at you. You can get the excess glue off by using a toothpick and go around the excess glue and just kind of shave it off the chow's head. Now it's time to apply the chow ball onto the chow head. So you're going to use a pair of pliers to open up one of the eye pins enough so that you can attach the eye pin of the chow's head onto the chow ball. And then use your pliers again once you have the chow's head eye pin through. Just close it up with your pliers. And then just repeat for when you're applying strap onto your chow or an earring. And then there you go, your chow head is all done. It looks so cute and magnificent, doesn't it? I'm just amazed at my final product of this chow head charm because it's the best I've ever done so far. It really looks official to me. You can also UV resin this chow head. I would recommend it as it really gives it a finished look. If you happen to have UV resin on hand, or if you're willing to buy some UV resin for your chow charm, there are plenty of tutorials on YouTube. I will link one in the description below. And here's me wearing the chow head charm as an example on my ear. It's adorable, so gorgeous. If you want to share your chow head charm, just message me. I don't know how messaging on YouTube works. Maybe you can drop it in the comments below, or you can DM me or at me on Instagram. I would love to see your works and how you did your own chow charm. And also, if you found this chow charm too hard for you, or if you don't want to go through making one, you can also buy one on my Etsy shop. But yeah, I decided to make this video because I've sold several Chao charms and wanted to give back and showing people how to make this Chao charm, since it's pretty easy. And to look forward to another video where hopefully I'll make a video on how to make a hero Chao head and the dark Chao head. I also have a full body Chao mini charm in my Etsy as well. If people requested enough, I'll also make a video for that. Thank you for watching.